Hello, and thank you for joining us for our monthly Facebook Q&A with Bishop Gaynor. You know, it's hard to believe that this is actually our final Q&A for 2021. This year has certainly had, its ups and downs, its challenges, but also its really good moments. And we're glad that, Bishop, that you've taken the time to join us again and reflect on some of those moments that we've had. And, we always appreciate the time that you're willing to give us and to answer the questions from our audience.
Well, you're very welcome, Rachel. It's time well spent, and I certainly enjoy it and enjoy the opportunity to respond to some of those questions that we receive.
Excellent. Well, let's dive right in. Our first question is from Victoria, and she's wondering why All Saints' Day was moved to November 1st.
Well, great. Good question, Victoria. And I wish I could say, here is the clear, exact reason. But historians of our church's liturgy are not unified. They don't agree on why November the 1st is now for a very long time, but how it became the date for the celebration of All Saints' Day. Let me give you the background, and this might help. What we do know is that in the Eastern Church, very early, in the early centuries, the Eastern churches celebrated a feast of all martyrs on May the 13th. And it was for those martyrs who didn't have their own special feast day, as some martyrs who were perhaps more famous, whose reputation was more widespread, they had their own feast day. But May 13th in the Eastern churches was a day for all martyrs. In the year 609, Pope Boniface IV was given by the Roman authorities the Pantheon, a beautiful, magnificent building in the city of Rome, and it was dedicated to all the Roman gods, the Pantheon, all the gods. And it became a church. And before it was dedicated, Pope Boniface IV ordered that as many of the remains of the Christians, many of them martyrs, that were buried in the catacombs, be brought and buried in the floor of the Pantheon. So wagons went out to the catacombs, disinterred the remains, and brought these bones into Rome, and they were buried within the Pantheon, under the floor. Part of the reason was that this was a time when there were invasions throughout Western Europe coming down into the Italian peninsula, and they were breaking into the tombs thinking that the Christians were buried with jewelry and precious objects and maybe even money, as was the practice in many ancient cultures. Not so with the Christians. Nevertheless, he wanted to protect the holy remains of the Christians, and especially those who had given their lives as martyrs. So on May the 13th, and Boniface probably chose that day knowing that this was a feast of all martyrs, all saints in the Eastern Church, May the 13th, he dedicated the Pantheon as the Church of St. Mary and the Martyrs. And from there on in, the celebration of that dedication on May the 13th was All Saints' Day. Now we move forward to the year 835. And there's the Pope at the time, Pope Gregory III, had a chapel built in the old, not the existing, but the old St. Peter's Basilica over the tomb of St. Peter himself at the Vatican. And this chapel, Pope Gregory dedicated as the Chapel of All Martyrs, or All Saints. And he did that on November the 1st. And most historians will say that the feast was changed from May the 13th to November the 1st in that year, 835, because from then on in, the church in Rome celebrated the anniversary of the dedication of that chapel on November the 1st. And as often happens in the history of our church's liturgy, what began in the Church of Rome under the authority of the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, became normative eventually throughout the whole church. And so November the 1st, the dedication of that chapel to all the saints became the Feast of All Saints.
That's fascinating.
Now, you may hear or read something different from that because, as I said, all church historians are not unanimous that that's the explanation. There are other possibilities, but it really, I think that's the most authoritative, and it's certainly been a long-standing feast to celebrate the wonder that our brothers and sisters in the body of Christ enjoy the glory of God in heaven. It's a great, joyful feast for the whole church.
Fascinating. Wonderful. Thank you, Bishop.
You're welcome.
So our next question then comes from Weldon, and he's wondering, what is the purpose of the Manipule, which is used during the traditional Latin Mass?
The Manipule. Maybe for those who are not familiar with that vestment, because in general, except for the traditional Latin Mass, it has disappeared as one of the priest's vestments, but it was a required vestment prior to the liturgical reforms of the Second Vatican Council. So the Manipule was a long piece of cloth, about a yard long, maybe 6 inches wide, perhaps, and it was placed over the left arm of the priest celebrant for the Mass. And so it would hang down on his left arm about 1.5 feet. And there were many different, as vestments are all very different designs, some more elaborate. So there could be a fringe or different designs. It would match the chasuble. So if there were, let's say, a red key row in the chasuble, there'd probably be a red key row on the Manipule. So the history of that particular vestment is kind of interesting. As often happens with our vestments, it has its origin in the normal daily clothing of the upper classes in ancient Rome.
Okay.
And people would wear a towel or a napkin over their arm and use it to wipe the perspiration from their face, from their hands, and also use it, as we do, a napkin at table when eating a meal. And also servants who would wait on people at table, and we even see this today in some, I guess, maybe fancier restaurants where the waiter or waitress might wear a towel over their arm, left arm if they're right-handed, and use that in serving the diners at table. So servants in ancient Rome would wear a towel over their left arm. And so that really is the origin of the Manipule. It was more of a napkin, a towel, to be used by anyone, especially in the hot summers of Rome, when you would wipe the perspiration using this towel or at table. The prayer, one of the ways we can get the significance of the vestments is by the vesting prayers that the priest would say as he put on each of the vestments before Mass. And the prayer that used to be said, and is said now before the traditional Latin Mass, regarding the Manipule, has to do with the cares and the worries of the world. May I bear the Manipule of tears and sorrow, so that I may enjoy the rewards of my labor. That's the prayer that the priest would say in Latin. So it has a significance of the servanthood of the priest. You know, he's a server. And it's interesting, the Manipule was only ever used at Mass. So it was never worn for benediction. It was never worn in processions. It was never worn in any of the other sacraments, just at the Eucharistic feast. And it probably has to do with that connection to the table, where those who were eating and those who were serving had this sort of a napkin or towel. But that's pretty much the history of that vestment, the Manipule.
Excellent. Thank you, Bishop. I had no idea.
Well, it's, again, all these things are somewhat complicated, and there are probably other explanations. But when someone asks about what does a vestment symbolize, I like to go back to those vesting prayers, because the words of those prayers describe the significance of that particular vestment.
Excellent. Thank you. So, we're nearing the end of 2021, and the new year's very quickly approaching. Are there any, parts of this past year, parts of 2021 that you would like to reflect on that, maybe have a significant meaning or you found were significant to the diocese this past year?
Well, certainly I think the one on everyone's mind when we look back to 2021 would be the pandemic and the ongoing challenges that it presents with these different variants that I guess will continue to occur. But as challenging as the COVID-19 pandemic has been for us, and it's been very challenging for our parishes and our schools and for all of us in our daily lives, our work life, our family life. I think it's important that we look at some of the good things, some of the lessons that we learned, things that emerged as we struggle to navigate the pandemic. And for us in the diocese, certainly one thing is our increased use of the available technology. We certainly did have technology. We were using it, some parishes more than others, the diocese in some ways, but not in other ways. But the pandemic caused us to really, I think, capitalize on not just more frequent use, but a better, more effective use of social media. And so, masses are still being live streamed for those who are unable. And it's particularly, I think, helpful for those who are homebound for long periods, either by age or illness, and are not able to get to their parish church. They're able to participate and see the environment of their church that they were so used to, their own pastor, parishioners that they know, rather than watching some mass that's nationally televised. There's no replacement for in-person participation and being able to receive the Word of God in person and to receive the body and blood of Christ in the Eucharist. But as long as someone is unable to come, then I think our new and better use of technology is a great blessing here in the diocese. Another thing that we saw that I'm very happy about, and I think we all are, is the increased enrollment in our Catholic schools. We saw an increase of about 6.5% in the enrollment of our schools, and that certainly reverses a trend that was true here in our diocese and true nationally, a trend of downward decreased enrollment. And to have found about more than 580 students are newly enrolled over our enrollment for the year 2020 is a great blessing. And a tribute, I think, to all of our wonderful leaders in our Catholic schools throughout the diocese, our administrators, our teachers, and our staff at our schools, our pastors, in promoting the quality of education and just the caring, supportive environment that we find in our Catholic schools, K through 12. So those are a few of the things that I think we can look back and say, it was a tough year and a challenging year, but at the same time, there are lessons that we learned and good things that emerged during the last 12 months.
Excellent. Thank you, Bishop. I think that's a great reflection. I'm sure our listeners and those who are watching would probably agree with you that lots of challenges, but also a lot of good that came out of the past year. So with the new year approaching, with 2022 around the corner, what is your wish or your prayer for the people of the diocese?
Well, I think, the new year, we're still certainly in the Christmas season. That's not just December the 25th for us, but it goes until we celebrate the baptism of our Lord. And so we're very much in a Christmas environment, you might say. And when I think of the birth of our Savior in Bethlehem, it's that environment, that spirit of peace and quiet, reflection. And I would certainly, first of all, wish that for our faithful and for all of those who live within the counties of our diocese. COVID, I think, had its way of wearing us down emotionally and mentally with a lot of concerns and worry, perhaps even anxiety. We read a lot about the mental health issues that have been exacerbated during this time. And so the peace, the quiet, the listening that is typified by the Holy Family and the miracle of our Savior's birth at Bethlehem. I wish that grace for all of the faithful, especially in our diocese. It is a time, I think, when we do need to recapture, as it were, and be immersed in that quiet, reflective listening and the peace that's brought to us by the Prince of Peace. So that would certainly be a primary wish that I would have in prayer for the people of the diocese as we move forward into this new calendar year.
Excellent. Thank you, Bishop. And then certainly, I'm sure the folks watching appreciate that wish for peace in the new year. So that's all the time that we have. Thank you for joining us. And as I said, this is our final Q&A with Bishop Gaynor for 2021. So from all of us here at the Diocese of Harrisburg, it's still a little early, but we do wish you a very Merry Christmas and a blessed New Year.